deeper into my study on what the future holds for all of us, I'm thrilled to have with us Amit Chandra, founder and chairperson of Bain Capital's India office, who joined the firm as part of the Asia Pacific leadership team. He's previously held positions at DSP Merrill Lynch, India's leading investment bank. He's also served on the boards of some large companies, including Tata Sons, Piramal Enterprises, Genpact, Emcure, and L&T Finance, really spanning a variety of industries there. And in the not-for-profit sector, he's been a trustee of the Tata Trust, the chairperson of Give India and the Akansha Foundation. He's also a founder/trustee of Ashoka University and a member of the advisory boards of Bridgespan India and Swadesh. He also, with his wife Archana, has co-founded the ATE Chandra Foundation with their close friend Anuj Bhagwati, which works closely with nonprofits and governments to design and scale solutions that impact the most marginalized populations. The couple was also listed in Forbes Asia's Heroes of Philanthropy list in 2016 and has been consistently listed amongst India's top 25 donors. Thank you, Amit Chandra, for doing this. This is an absolute pleasure to have someone with your depth and breadth of experience and expertise, and someone who stays so humble and grounded. In all my interactions and meetings with you, you've come across as someone so accessible and just so giving. It's no surprise to me that you have now centered your life and career around giving, because you really do embody that spirit when one gets to meet with you.
Thank you, Vibha. Thank you for inviting me to this talk.
Terrific. All right. So, just to sort of warm up the conversation and get started as we think about the future, from where you sit, you sit at the vantage point of thinking about the future of India from a development perspective, and you sit on the boards of so many different organizations. Why think about the future? Why is it important to even have this conversation? Why think about this topic?
Yeah. In some ways, thinking about the future is a little bit of a futile exercise because it's very incredibly tough to predict it. I can tell you without doubt that, what I'm doing today, I had no idea I'd be doing it, 15 years ago. And I look at my life in probably 3 or 4 phases. And I can tell you that my ability to have predicted what would have unfolded next was pretty low at the beginning of each of those phases. So I realized that there is a little bit of a futility in trying to get things precisely right. But at the same point of time, I also have realized that if you do want to get things right, there are a number of things that when you look back, you realize you're so glad you have done, which make you future ready. And therefore, I think when you think about trends, which way the world is heading in, I think it's kind of important to just crystal ball gaze a little bit and make sure that you have, tailwinds as opposed to headwinds.
Okay, I like that phrasing. Tailwinds as opposed to headwinds. Okay, so as you're sitting where you are, where do you think the tailwinds are taking us? What are trends you're seeing? What are you observing sort of on the ground? And let's do this from a development sector perspective to start with. What's going on?
Actually, I'll get to the development sector in a bit, but I feel that there are a lot of very interesting things which are happening in the world at this point of time. Probably one of the most interesting things which is happening is how technology is evolving. Technology has always, suddenly popped its head up and taken us in very interesting directions even through my life. I mean, for example, the calculator became really popular when I was in school and college, and it was a really remarkable transformative device. It made memorizing tables a unique thing that was a good to have, but not a must have. But it made doing so many things super, super easy. And then a number of other skills became important for you to basically succeed. And then later on in my career, we saw the advent of the computer, and we didn't know where it would take us, but now we know where it has taken us. And now suddenly we are talking about artificial intelligence, and there's obviously a lot of fear, as there was when the computer replaced the typewriter and when the calculator replaced our memory. So technology always brings fear.
Mhm.
It has done so through the ages when textile machinery replaced looms. The world thought mass employment would come to an end. And so there's always this fear, but often it solves problems we never imagined that it would solve. And so,
Okay,
uh,
so are you
you
an
know,
optimist then? That I'm getting different perspectives on every conversation, you know. So people are worried that AI is going to take away our jobs. Elon Musk says there will be no jobs in the future. Where do you stand on this spectrum?
yeah, I'm still forming my opinion. There will be definitely a number of jobs which will become redundant. If you were a typist, a stenographer in the early 90s, late 80s, it was a very remarkable skill. And how many words you could type a minute
Sure.
with accuracy was meant that you could, accordingly get paid a lot.
Yeah, top line on your
Um,
resume.
and exactly, it was like, an opening sentence on your resume.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of jobs will become redundant. But in many areas, we will see AI unleash productivity gains and problem solving of the kind that we've never imagined before.
Are you seeing
Now,
corporate India sort of have a positive take on AI? Are you seeing within corporate India an uptake towards AI, or are you seeing hesitation, fear? You know, what is the emotion you're seeing?
I think we are still finding our way. We are still figuring out where we can make it work and how. But that's very typical with any new technology. With any new technology, you kind of, the adoption curve tends to be a very steep curve. And so I think globally we are right there. And I think that's no different in case of India. And that's true about corporate India, but I even think about the social sector. I attended a talk along with Archana yesterday about AI for good. And I saw a remarkable case study of a NGO working in the healthcare sector, which has actually done a remarkable job using AI to actually improve its efficacy by 30%. And so, imagine India's social delivery improving, taking a leapfrog jump because we are able to put AI inside, and as a consequence of which we're able to address big sticky wicked problems by 20-30%, better with 20-30% less resources. That can be transformative at the bottom of the pyramid. So whether it is corporate India or it is social India, I think one of the big mega trends is undoubtedly going to be AI, just the way automation was a big trend on the shop floor and computers was a big trend in factories. So I think making sure that we stay ahead of this, in my mind, is going to be important. Will there be job displacement? There will definitely be job displacement. There will also be productivity gains. And there will also be people who will be needed to basically go out and make all these new technologies work for greater good. And so I think ultimately we've seen, at least historically, technologies have generally not resulted in job displacement. That's what history teaches us.
Sure, yeah. In the fourth industrial revolution also, we saw that happening, right?
Exactly.
There was
We've
so
seen
much
that,
anxiety. Yeah.
but will it, I know a lot of accomplished thinkers who are saying this time it's going to be different. Will it or not? I think time will tell.
Okay, great.
But this is definitely one of the big mega trends of our time, which is, means that we have got to be prepared for a lot of disruption in a lot of careers and a lot of verticals.
Okay. Since you brought up the example of AI in the dev space, can you share with us how exactly they're using it? Is there a use case for implementation of the
Oh yeah, it's
healthcare
very
company
simple. I
mentioned?
mean, at the end of the day, I mean, think of it. I mean, this was a remarkable case of an NGO who, does outbound calling, to pregnant mothers to make sure that they implement, certain things to ensure their own health and the health of their babies. Right? Very simple, age-old technique, but the first round of technology, which is basically the telecom revolution, has enabled us to do this in an efficient way, which is through telecom networks. Earlier on, you had to do this, door to door through ASHA workers, right? So obviously it was expensive, an
So
ASHA worker.
now they have the AI calling. Is that
Now
what's
you have,
happening?
so now basically you have this NGO, which is basically using a call center, and that call center is calling literally hundreds of thousands of beneficiaries to do these calls. Now, what you discover over time is there are massive dropout rates, right? Now, when you're dealing with millions of mothers, right? And you have 20, 30, 40% dropout rates, which are bound to happen. Even I'm sure people who are listening to this conversation, there won't be the same number of people at the start relative to the finish. That's true about any medium, right? And so the question is, how do you keep people engaged? So what AI can help you do is can help you identify the patterns which drive engagement. Okay, why do certain people drop out?
At what point did they drop off?
What point of time they drop out, right? You can use algorithms to be able to predict that. And then you can drive specific interventions to change that, right?
Okay, great.
Now, this is where technology becomes really powerful. And then the beauty of it is you can do all of this at very, very low cost, right? And imagine if you're able to do that and you're able to improve your efficacy, which in this case, this NGO was able to do by 20, 30%, right? Imagine 20, 30% improvement in efficacy in terms of outcomes of pregnant women, right? And that's huge societal good. So I do feel that there are going to be opportunity, whether, we obviously, all of us know about use cases in the corporate world of how it can, whether it's cyber security or, improvement in quality on shop floors or whatever. But I think there's so much opportunity in the social sphere.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you for sharing that example. So definitely AI is a big theme, big trend to look out for. Another one we've identified is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let's take that from both lenses, from the leadership and corporate circles and then the social circles. How much DEI awareness are you seeing at organizations? Is there really a move towards women, LGBTQ plus, etc., in the corporate spaces, both in India and globally? And how are you seeing inclusion coming into both workspaces and the dev space?
Yeah, so Vibha, I think DEI and generally, because it all comes under the whole ESG umbrella, it has got a massive fillip in the last decade. And I think that's happened really for two reasons. One is a regulatory reason, which we now have a regulatory framework for reporting and compliance, which people must adhere to, right? So if you're a listed company, SEBI basically says you must do A, B, C, D, E, and you must, publish it, and you must, so that compliance is driving rapid adoption of all these practices, which earlier on for some people were, I want to do this because it's the right thing to do. Now, a number of people need to do it, whether it's DEI or environmental compliance or other, things which are essentially more in the right to do category, because I need to comply and the cost of compliance is going to be very high if there's any breakage, right? So I think that has made a big difference. The second,
so the government coming in, so
the government coming in. So so basically the government coming in and saying that, look, we know there's a big societal cost. If you don't do these things, we ultimately, the government has to backstop costs, be it, environmental damage or be it societal damage or any kind of damage. So basically government has put frameworks in place and say, you guys got to do all these things. And so now this is basically driving a lot of behavior, women on boards, disclosure on women in workforce, etc. So that's one. But there's also, I think, another factor which is becoming very important, which is consumer pressure, investor pressure, and I would say all kind of stakeholder pressure. And I think what's really aiding all of that pressure is actually the proliferation of social media. Earlier on, you could get away with a lot of things by doing management of, stakeholders. And the more powerful your management, PR management, etc., you could actually contain a situation. Today with social media, even the smallest problem can go
It
viral,
gets amplified. Yeah.
gets
Okay.
amplified, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think people have realized that there is a cost of, being seen as a bad actor. Okay.
Okay.
On the
It
flip
sounds like it's
side,
led more by consumer governance,
yes,
really stemming from leadership per se. It's stemming from the
absolutely.
outside.
It's stemming. So I think while earlier on, all of this was led more from the inside in a small fraction of companies, now I think it is, I mean, a great example was ICICI, where my mentor, Mr. Waghul, was really at the forefront of building a extremely diverse
Women heavy.
cadre of exceptional
Yeah.
women leaders,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
But that was really the exception. When everyone was asked that, we all point to that one company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I think things are changing. Things are rapidly changing, and I think we are heading in the direction where these are things which are becoming really, really driven both by compliance and by market forces.
Okay. So, and you see this in the future. Let's define the future as in the next 5 to 7 years, the short-term future. Do you see a radical shift happening in India, at least in the diversity space?
I don't see a radical shift. I
You
don't
don't
see a
see a
radical shift. Now I see much more of a linear movement in the direction that has been set out for us. I think the radical shift came in with the compliance norms. I think now, maybe there will be some instances which will, get amplified in the media, which will make people say, oh, okay, I need to do this a little bit better, etc. So barring that, I generally feel, I think it'll be more a linear
Okay.
trajectory from here
What
on.
will it take? What will it take for the future to be more diverse?
Actually, it'll take a movement, a movement where first and foremost, I think certain segments of society get up and say, I will really reward good behavior and I will penalize bad behavior. Okay. So, for example, if women who are the biggest consumers in certain categories say that, you know what, I really care about what diversity in companies looks like, right? And at least where I'm a consumer, I'm going to start thinking differently. You will actually, that's when people will say, oh, you know what, there is a cost. I can't get away with this.
Okay. So it has to be market force led. There has to be a capitalistic argument for this, is what I'm understanding.
I think market forces will accelerate. And then I think eventually we will get there because, you realize that, people are always very careful about compliance costs. Even governments want to be careful about imposing too much of a compliance burden because everything is super competitive today. We are at the end of the day competing with neighboring countries, with other countries. And so governments also want to be very careful about how much regulation they bring in. Therefore, market forces is generally the much better way.
It's a good tool. Yeah. Okay, great. And shifting to your other hat on the philanthropic side, when you're working on capacity building, leading to inclusion, tell me a little bit about issues you're seeing on the ground. And again, are you optimistic about the future and what's going to lead the change there?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think the social sector is actually much better when it comes to demonstrating diversity, for example, than the corporate world is. And it's and I say it's interesting, not because I've observed a number of remarkable organizations with, women leaders and the percentage seems to be higher. But I also say so because at the end of the day, social sector organizations are solving far more complex and sticky problems than corporate ones are. I mean, I'm not trivializing what it takes to build a car.
And you're saying women are more capable of solving some of these more complex
Well, I'm saying that, I'm saying that, it's interesting that we have We have more women in organizations dealing with more difficult issues than women leaders in
I'm so
organizations.
glad you didn't just put it on the, oh, women are more empathetic and therefore they run development.
No, I mean, of course, I believe that is true, but I mean, and a great example, I think, is our own foundation where, one of the two verticals we have is rural development, and the work we do there, a lot of the work we do is in water security, very difficult vertical area to work in. Typically, that requires you going to drought hit areas of the country, and working often in summers, months leading up to summer when temperatures could be between 40 and 50 degrees. And it's not easy, and a lot of these places don't have hotels. They're difficult to get to. You need to drive for hours to get to your end destination, and then you have to work with government officials on the ground, NGOs, small NGO leaders of small NGOs, etc. And our entire leadership team is women. Most of our team, 80% of our team is women. So we get the job done, and it's tough work. It's very, very tough work. And I see this in many organizations in the country. Okay. So I do feel that when it comes to diversity and inclusion, I think the social sector actually has probably something to teach the corporate world.
Okay, terrific. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Like taking on the lens of inclusion more from, a more macro level of bringing in larger segments of the lower strata, which is a lot of work that you're doing with your foundation, or your wife does a lot of this with the Jayavaki Foundation as well. Where do you see that going? Do you really, again, you're seeing more polarization, right? You're thinking about AI and saying, is AI now going to make those with more access to technology, more familiarity with it? Are we going to see that chasm sort of widen now and see an even more polarized country? Or are we going to see a more equalized country if we get the bottom to be part of the middle?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. Look, I do think that it'll depend a lot on how our leaders think about how we want to deploy AI. Okay. And so, for example, if there is, I believe, a big opportunity for us to deploy AI in for good, okay, in the social sector, etc. This will require building capabilities in social sector delivery, be it in the government or in the not-for-profit sector, to be able to make this deployment work. Requires investing in the capacity of these organizations. It requires funding the development of that work, etc. So I think if we go out and we provide those resources, then automatically these sectors will benefit from these technologies. If we don't, they will get starved. In general, I think whether an area benefits or gets starved from anything that's disruptive, at the end of the day, is determined a lot by the choices we make when it is rolled out. Okay. I mean, Suzuki decided that the same technology which was available, which is four-wheelers, he wanted to make sure it created a mass market for cars, right? And that's what he landed up doing. Sure. On the other hand, there have been people who basically said, no, we want to basically go out and use that technology to build absolutely premium end vehicles. So I think these are choices that we make. The underlying technology is exactly the same. Correct. And we need our leaders across, be it government, be it business, be it in philanthropy, to help make those choices responsibly.
Okay. So this could go either way, you're saying?
I think this will go either way. I think the opportunity exists.
Okay, there is an opportunity. Okay, great.
There is an opportunity.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so we've spoken about AI, we've spoken about diversity. Let's pick on a third theme of sustainability. There's a lot of talk about, I've just come back from a trip to Europe, and it's everywhere in Europe, electric vehicles, green energy, the hotel rooms have signs, the hospitals have signs, When you book a tour, it will say, hey, you want to pay for your carbon credit, pay an extra, whatever, 5 euros. And so this is big. It's big globally. Where do you see this? Is this a trend that's momentary? Is this a 5-year fad? Is this something
No,
serious?
I don't think this is a fad. I think this is I think we have hit the threshold for this to, for sustainability to be sustainable. So I think we have already hit that threshold, and I think it will only grow from here. Our country is no different. Okay. If you look incrementally at the energy capacity that our country is adding, for example, there is more energy capacity being added in the renewable space than in the non-renewable energy space, right? So who would have imagined that 10 years ago? Nobody would have imagined that 10 years ago. If you look at electric and hybrid vehicles, right? Already, I think the percentage is beginning to become a very interesting number, right? I would hazard a guess and say in many parts of the world, we've got close to 50% of new vehicles are now electric and hybrid. Can India get there in 10 years? We can. I think, so the adoption curves of some of these new technologies generally tend to surprise you, but they tend to actually be the steepest in countries that grow the fastest. Because, remember, we have the opportunity to leapfrog. Just like in telecom, we leapfrogged, and now most of our network is 4G and 5G.
Sure. Because we get the benefit of technology.
So I personally feel that there will be many areas in which we will leapfrog. The areas where I think we, unfortunately, are laggards, and we will have to figure out how we do certain things to make sure that we address important burning issues, are all the ones relating to behavior. Because you can change the energy pattern, you can change the mobility pattern. How do you change consumption pattern when it comes to usage of material? How do you change the disposal pattern, to make sure that people are segregating that waste in a sensible way? How do you make sure, people are conserving water and using water
the civil
properly?
society component, you think?
Yes. So I think that, in my mind, that behavior shifts are much, much more difficult
to bring in. Okay.
And I think, we've got to crack that for to get that next. We have one engine firing, which is, when we can show an economic case, I think we are able to make the switch very quickly. We have to make the other engine fire, which is, the behavior engine.
Okay, great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about leadership now, because obviously you've been recognized as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum, and you've seen a lot.
When I was half my age, yeah.
And so half your age ago, and today, with all the experience added on to that, with all the board positions and all the work that you've done, where do you see leadership evolving to? With when the traditional management was about a human being at the top and sort of working with a team of humans, and now you will have a situation where you're co-botting human with machine. How does leadership evolve? When you're working in an era with younger populations, with more machines, with a changing workforce, with hybrid environments, how do you see leadership having to keep pace?
Yeah. Vibha, I don't think the basics of leadership have changed. Because I think the answer lies in your question. All the things that you talked about, interestingly, the nature of change may have been different 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But there was some change which was relevant that leaders had to face at that point of time, and they had to adapt to at that point of time. Every generation of leaders will face some unique, technology, some unique social movement, and they will have to basically figure out how to adapt to it. Okay. Generally, what that requires is for leaders to, be adaptable. Very, very important. Okay. Meaning when you see something moving in a particular direction, you have to understand why it is moving in that direction. What is it that I can do to be ahead of it? Okay. That agility in leaders, ability to comprehend and ability to be agile, I think is extremely, extremely important. I think as long as leaders have that, I've seen that even, leaders who are 20 years older than me are sometimes much more relevant than leaders who are 20 years younger than me. So I think this is not about age of leaders or what generation they come from. It's about their own capabilities and characteristics.
Okay. So age not a factor. Being adaptable, definitely a factor. But the tenets of leadership, according to you, will remain the same.
The tenets of leadership, in my view, remain the same.
Okay, fine. Okay, so you're not seeing a difference in sort of management styles when you have a younger workforce, when you have a hybrid environment where half your office isn't even physically in office.
Yeah. Well, I think, people overstate this hybrid environment thing because now most organizations I know have, while it's hybrid, it's like, it's 1 day a week kind of hybrid. Very few people are working completely remote anymore or substantially remote anymore. There are a few, but I think, most people have reverted back to let's give people some flexibility as opposed to no flexibility.
Okay, so since you touched upon that, the office space in your view will remain as a primary space of work. You're not seeing the offices become redundant in the future.
I don't see offices. Well, I think there will be different kind of organizations. There will be some organizations where you really require people to work around the core. And I think those organizations essentially will be built around offices. And then there will be some organizations where essentially you can almost function like an individual. Now that individual can be a consultant or technically, in which case you may be a payroll of that organization, but you're dedicated to the organization, or you could just purely be a vendor, right? In which case it doesn't matter where you work from. An organization may actually prefer you don't work on their campus, right? I think what will happen increasingly, in my view, is that we will start making that distinction very clearly. And we'll say what really is core and what is non-core. And let me move whatever is non-core out. Right?
Okay.
This is not new. I mean, this is what the entire outsourcing industry was about.
Sure.
We are just going to face another round of outsourcing because what has happened with COVID is we have realized that a lot more things could be outsourced. And everything need not be outsourced to a large company. Some of it can be outsourced to, actually our own employees who were working with us before. And all of them need not be a part of a team. Because some of them are doing discrete things, which, if they actually save the 20% that they're spending in a month on transportation and they value the flexibility, you're better off doing it that way.
I mean, I guess the outsourcing boom was also more largely countries outside of India giving work to sort of cheaper labor economies. Now you see it within the same country. So that inter-country to intra-country shift we might see. And also we were seeing it in very large organizations earlier, right? But now you see it in like small companies, small startups saying, we've outsourced digital to someone, we've outsourced our payroll to someone. So I think the scale has also shifted a little bit. But I think your parallel is perfectly on point, where it's essentially the outsourcing boom just happening again at a different scale and
different type of players.
Different type of players. Okay, terrific. Okay, let's talk a little bit about skilling. If I'm somebody, entering college today, I'm finishing up high school, entering college, about to graduate college, in that sort of age group, and I'm thinking about the future, watching this interview, what advice would Amit Chandra give me in terms of skilling? What should I be firstly studying at college? Maybe let's start with that. Like, hey, I don't know what to study. Amit Chandra, please advise me on what I should be studying. What degree would you recommend?
Yeah. So I would put things in two buckets. One is skills and the other is character traits. Okay. Let me just talk about skills. I feel that, and given a lot of that, what we've talked about, I think digital literacy is going to be a very important skill. Okay. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be a computer scientist, but your ability to interface with technology in whichever field you're in will become very important. Okay. So, it'll be, I think everyone needs to make sure that technology is their friend and not fear technology. Okay. So basic amount of digital literacy is very important. Just like I tell every woman I know that's important to be financially literate, I think going forward, I will tell every youngster I know that please become digitally literate. Okay.
Okay.
The second thing I would say is that, look, I think it's going to be very important to have critical and analytical reasoning capabilities. Okay. Because a lot of things you will be able to give a computer to do, but defining the problem and will be very, very important. Because once you define the problem, I think AI can take it over. It can look at a lot of the data and it can come up with an answer. But the first part of it is actually very important, framing the problem. Okay. So I think that in my mind is going to be very important. The ability to problem solve, think about have a hypothesis on what it takes to, solve a problem. I think will be extreme, because in the computer may not necessarily, you will have to give the computer some starting point. Okay, so I think that's going to be very, very important. I think what I call generally from umbrella skills, emotional skills will be extremely important. Okay. Look, you can replace a lot of things with with a box. What you cannot replace is the human interface. Okay. You cannot replace the need for someone who is capable of collaborating, someone who's capable of, communicating to the outside world, what your value proposition is, convincing someone how something should be done efficiently, uh, you know, running a group, a team, and doing so, or even being a part of a team and doing so well. Okay. All these, what I call emotional skills, I think are going to be absolutely foundational. And it's interesting, and none of these three have really talked about knowledge and domain, because I think those will increasingly become more and more commoditized. Okay. So if, as long as you're smart and sensible, you will be able to use decent technology to get to the right answer very, very quickly in many areas. I think in terms of character traits, it's the good old things of, perseverance and humility and, integrity, which I think will always, get people to, win in the long term. The one other thing, if I was to flag, which I think is going to become very important, because it has crept in like a cancer into our society and has grown, unfortunately, very, very rapidly because of social media, is the ability to be mentally balanced. So whether you're young or you're mid-career or you're late career, your ability to succeed and sustain yourself will depend a lot on your ability to manage your own mind and body. And this, in my mind, is going to be absolutely critical. We'll have to figure out how we change, education, both formal and informal, to address it.
Okay, terrific. I love your skills. Beautiful. They very much align with most of the skills we've outlined in the book. But what really stands out to me in all the skills you mentioned is, having known you and having heard you on many panels, you seem to check off all the boxes. So you seem to have all the future ready skills already. Okay.
Work in progress. Yeah.
Work in progress. Since you touched upon education, and since, of course, it's a very big part of the book, and of course the part of the future of any nation and the world as we think about the future, tell me a little bit about how you think education is going to evolve. I've had conversations spanning from schools and colleges are going to become redundant. It's all going to shut down. No one's going to send their child to school anymore. Two, the university will always remain at the core of existence and core of societies, and people will still want to send their child to Harvard Business School or MIT, etc. Where are you on this spectrum?
Yeah, I think schools and colleges will continue to be very important in my view, because what they really do is prepare someone to ultimately, be good and useful citizens for the real world. And importantly, also, someone who can deal with all the crap that exists in the real world. All of that, how do you deal with bullying? How do you deal with trolling? How do you deal with, body shaming? How do you deal with, and all of that, actually, the best lab is actually a school and a college, right? So apart from everything else, the good things that happen to all of us in our life, I think the prep on how to deal with a lot of the crap that we deal with actually happens in school and college. So I don't think that you can substitute school and college. In fact, if you take school and college out, then the problem that you have is that you further create, we'll all live further in this vacuum, which will push us into this world of social media. And I think that will, in my mind, will be the collapse of society. Okay. So I don't see a substitute that. The big question, however, is how will schools and colleges adapt?
Yeah.
How will courses change? And what has worked in the past may not necessarily work in the future. There, I think a lot will change. I mean, many things may not be relevant in the future that were relevant in the past. And if they don't change themselves, they will, I think, have a problem. I think an MBA may not be relevant to everyone. Many areas of medicine may become less relevant. There'll be new areas of medicine that will become more relevant. There'll be areas between medicine and technology which will have to emerge. There will be so many things which will happen because of the way the world is basically evolving, that there will be institutions which will have to basically reshape their curriculum and the way they deliver that curriculum.
So are you seeing more interdisciplinary education?
For sure.
Yes.
I think there'll have to be a much greater emphasis on foundational courses. And then after that, kind of, a much greater emphasis on interdisciplinary stuff. In general, I think you'll have to prepare people for also uncertain careers. Gone are the days where you could, the median person may be entering one career and will leave one career. And so you need to figure out how do you empower that person to, be able to make shifts because things will change.
Okay. If you had to go back to college, what would you study today?
Liberal arts, for sure.
For sure, liberal arts.
Oh, for sure. Undoubtedly.
Okay. So a bent towards humanities and not technology.
Yes, I think. I mean, I enjoyed, after my engineering, I worked for Larsen and Toubro for a few years, and it was probably the best job I had. But it was the best job I had because of the mentorship I had and because I got to work on the field, and that's where I learned the most. But I don't think, if I think about what has prepared me for the long term, and where maximum learning has come, it's actually come from even things when I go back to college and think about it, it's actually been things relating to doing extracurricular stuff like in debating and editing the literary magazine and organizing a rock show, or it's a lot of stuff which is pushing my limits on creativity, on collaboration, on leadership, on communication. And fortunately for me, also expanding my knowledge on things which I actually would have learned, like philosophy, etc., which later on I landed up actually just learning on my own.
Self-learning.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Okay, last question, and then we'll close this. So as we've been having these conversations and I've been reading lots of content on the future of work, there is a sort of apocalypse kind of situation which people are predicting, saying everything's going to fall apart. with global warming, and we're seeing global warming. It's very real, right? We're living in a very hot summer. World is hot right now. Around the Arctic poles, you're seeing massive melts in the polar belts, and we hear a completely contrarian opinion saying, look, it's going to be great. Technology is coming. It's our big savior. AI is going to come in, make our lives more productive. We're finally going to have more time to enjoy the good life. It's like going to be the Renaissance, because now technology will take care of all our menial tasks and we can actually go back to being humans again. Where are you on the spectrum? Is there a doomsday, boom day scenario in your mind, or something in the middle?
No, I think the issues that you flagged are very real issues, and whether technology improves some of the aspects of our lives does not mean that it's necessarily going to solve with any degree of urgency some of the others which have got unfortunately seeded by my generation and the generation before me, and the price for which is going to be paid by both my generation and the generation after us. So, for example, the pollution problem that we live with, particularly acute in our country. It's not necessarily, we can use technology to try to solve it with some urgency, but, just because technology may solve certain other problems in our life, it's not necessarily, that it's not great if our feet is in a ice cube box and our head is in the oven, and our body temperature at the navel is normal. That's not a healthy body. So we will have to solve these problems with real urgency. Otherwise, I think we're going to have real disruption to our lives, irrespective of, even if in the great scenario, we harness technology for good with to the best of our ability. So the core problems that we have relating to climate change are probably one of the most urgent issues of our time and need to be dealt with real urgency.
But are you generally optimistic? You think it's going to happen? You have an optimistic future?
I'm very worried that we don't have the degree of urgency that we need to have on addressing these issues. And you can see it every year, the price that we are beginning to pay is higher and higher. And, I think we need to really wake up and smell the coffee.
Okay, so it's for you. It's like a wake. It's an alarm.
Yes,
alarm
I still feel very few people actually understand how deep we are in trouble on climate change.
Okay. Any final words you want for young people to share with young people who might be listening in, just on advice on the future?
Yeah, no, I think, look, these are exciting times. I know that people hear all kind of doomsday kind of forecasts, and I remember there are a lot of things which happen cyclically, and sometimes you mix them up for things which are happening structurally. I finished my MBA at a point of time which was a bad point of time in the cycle. And I heard a lot of doomsday things at that point of time, and my career worked out just fine.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily cyclically we're in a bad spot, but I do feel that youngsters need to work on the right things to be successful. And very importantly, I think while you do everything that you need to do to succeed in the long term, I think you need to also balance that off by making sure you enjoy the journey. Okay, terrific. All right. I've surely enjoyed the journey of the last 45 minutes or so with you, Amit Chandra. Thank you so much for your wise nuggets. Terrific experience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.